So guys, today and a few upcoming sessions, we are going to discuss the complete deployment life cycle into Microsoft Azure. So basically what we are going to do. So basically we are going to develop a ASP.NET Core Web API application. The database is going to be SQL Server. And then I will show you how you can deploy this ASP.NET Core Web API application and the SQL Server database into Microsoft Azure step by step. So basically, what I'm going to discuss. So it is going to be a step by step process. Step by step process. Why I'm making because to make the things very simple to understand. So, what are the things we are going to discuss? First of all, I will take this chapter one where I'm going to discuss what is the deployment, what is right our development environment versus production environment, why you need to go to the production environment, what are the different kind of a production environment, why people are preferring cloud computing nowadays, right? What are the different cloud services provided, something like IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, right? Why companies nowadays prefer cloud hosting, right? What is Microsoft Azure? Why companies are preferring Microsoft Azure? I mean, what are the benefit of using Microsoft Azure? So this is going to give you, right, a complete fundamental architecture. I mean, fundamental understanding are going to be clear that before proceeding and before deploying or before developing application, and you should already understand it very clearly why I'm going with the cloud computing, what are the different cloud computing services are provided, and if I'm using cloud computing, then what benefit I'm getting over on-premise deployment. So that is what I'm going to cover in chapter one. In chapter two, I'm going to show you the complete architecture, right? So if you are going to deploy one application, then how that application is architect, what are the different components, how these components are going to work with each other, right? That complete architecture I'm going to display. And for this particular scenario, right, in our course, we are going to use ASP.NET Core Web API as the backend application, and SQL Server is going to be the database. So basically, I'll show you what are controllers, what are services, the repository, database, why SQL Server, what are API endpoint, client, what is connection string, what are the different environment variables, right? And also, I'm going to make you understand, guys, one more thing. Deploying the application versus deploying the database are two different things. So where we should deploy our application code, where we should deploy our right database code, how they are going to be communicated. That is also one of the major part that what we are going to cover. And in chapter three, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a complete ASP.NET Core Web API project targeting SQL Server using Entity Framework code. So I'm going to show you how to create a controller, how to create repositories, how to create a services, how to create a models, how to create a DTOs, right? How these components are going to be interact with each other, right? How you can create a different environment, production environment configuration file, development environment configuration file, right? All these things I'm going to discuss. And then I'm going to show you how to run this application locally, how you can write test the endpoint using Postman and Swagger. So once this thing is completed in chapter 4, I'm going to show you it before moving to Azure. Right? Before moving to Azure, what are the things you need to take into consideration? This is a very small thing, but very important. So I'm going to show you what is the difference between a release build versus like the debug build, how you can ensure the production configuration, where you should store the connection string, how to handle the environment variables, how you can handle the secrets very right securely, why you should not hard code the right data sensitive data within the application code file, and all this thing, right? So before moving to Azure or any production environment, this thing whatever you are doing till now within your local machine, that is fine, but before moving to the production you need to right find this thing. If these things are there in your application code, then you need to find a better solution how you can handle this thing right from the security perspective. So once this is done, then I'm going to show you how you can create your Azure account. So basically, what is Microsoft Azure? Why you should create Azure account? What are the minimum things you required for creating Azure account? Why you need a Microsoft account for creating a Azure account? How you can then how you are going to create the Azure account step by step? What is student free account? What is normal free account? What is pay as you go model, right? How you can create a different types of account, right? All these things we are going to discuss. And at the same time, I'm also going to discuss what is exactly a subscription, what is exactly a resource group, how to create a resource group, right? What is a region, why you need to choose a region, right? All these things I'm going to cover. Yeah. Once this part is done, in chapter 6, what I'm going to discuss Azure services required for manual deployment. So, guys, remember, I'm going to start with the manual deployment and then I'm going to proceed with the containerization based deployment along with the CI/CD pipeline. So, I will show you how you can do the manual deployment in Microsoft Azure. So, for Microsoft Azure manual deployment, what are the resources or services you require? So, what is the service plan? Azure App Service. What is service plan? What is SQL database? What is logical SQL provider? Sorry, SQL logical server. Why resource group are required? And how your application service and Azure service database work together. So this is what I'm going to discuss in chapter 6. So once you know, understand, right, what are the services I required for my manual application deployment, right, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this chapter 7, where you are going to deploy your ASP.NET Core Web API into Azure. So for this purpose, whatever the things you need, right? For example, creating a service plan, creating Azure app, right? Web app, right? While you are creating the web app, you need to select, right? What is the runtime? What is the right region where you need to host your application location? So, and then I'm going to show you, right? Once the required services you created on Microsoft Azure, how you can publish your ASP.NET Core Web API code into that service. I mean into Azure. So again, for publishing, I will show you how you can use right Visual Studio Publish profile where you can use Azure directly to publish your code. Also, I'm going to show you, right, for example, if that option is not available, right, then how you can create a zip file with the publish folder DLL configuration and how you can deploy that into Microsoft Azure. Then also in Azure, I will show you how you can set the environment, right? Whether you want to run the application, right, in staging environment or production environment, how you can do the setting. And I'm also going to show you, right, after deployment, whether it is working fine or not. So we're definitely going to create one a health check endpoint for the testing purpose. So I'm going to show you whether it is working or not using Swagger and Postman. Then, right, I'm going to show you migrating the SQL Server database to Azure SQL database. For example, you created your document database on your local machine. So how you can migrate that database to Microsoft Azure? That's what also I'm going to discuss in chapter 8. In chapter 9, I'm going to discuss once you right, migrate, then how you can connect your deployed web API with a SQL Server, Azure SQL database. See, in your local machine, it is SQL Server. In Microsoft Azure, that is going to be Azure SQL. So you deployed separately your right web API. You deployed separately with your Azure SQL data. Guys, remember for deploying web API, you need a separate service. For deploying Azure SQL database, you need a separate service. So once these two things are deployed, how you can connect your Azure app, right? How you can connect your web API with SQL Server database? That is what I'm going to discuss in chapter 9. So till chapter 9, what we discuss without using containerization, I mean Docker and Kubernetes, without using CI/CD pipeline, how manually you can deploy your application right into Microsoft Azure. So that's what we are going to cover till chapter 9. So from chapter 10, we are going to discuss first of all what is Docker a concept, why need Docker, what is container, what is Docker images, what is Docker engine, what is Docker right, desktop, what do you mean by port mapping, right? All the right, very basic concept which are related to Docker. That's what we are going to discuss in chapter 10. In chapter 9, we are going to containerizing the ASP.NET Core Web API. So basically, we will cover right how to writing a Docker file, how to use a multi-stage build. So if this terminology are very right complicated at this point of time. So, but don't worry, we will discuss everything practically, right? So how you can right containerize your ASP.NET Core Web API. So what is container registry and image management, right? Then I'm going to discuss right how you can host your application into Docker containerized container. Then I'm going to discuss the Kubernetes and Azure Kubernetes services fundamental concept. AKS means Azure Kubernetes and services. So this fundamental concept I'm going to discuss, and then I'm going to show you how you can deploy your web API into AKS. So I'm also going to discuss what is Docker, what is Kubernetes, what is the difference between them, right? All these things I'm going to discuss. And then finally, right, I'm going to discuss you this concept, how you can manage the configuration secrets, how you can implement scaling. Scaling means what, right? Horizontal scaling, vertical scaling, right? And how you can implement a rollback in, right, Azure Container Services. In chapter 7, right, what I'm going to discuss, CI/CD pipeline. CI/CD pipeline with Docker and AKS, right? Docker and Kubernetes. That's what I'm going to discuss in chapter 7, 17. And in chapter 18, I'm going to compare. So manually, you are deploying to app service, you are deploying to Docker, right? Docker, you are deploying to Azure Kubernetes service. So I'm going to combine between these three, which one is suitable for what prepare, how the cost management is calculated, so that you can take the decision whether you need to deploy into app service or Docker or whatnot. So that is what we are going to discuss in our yeah, right, in this course. And guys, remember, this is not the complete Azure. So complete Azure course means there are multiple certification: Azure Fundamental, Azure Developer, Azure Developer Associate, Azure DevOps, right? Like Azure Administrator. So many courses are available for Microsoft Azure, and this is, you can consider basic and fundamental things which is required for any kind of a Microsoft Azure certification courses. So here you will get the fundamental concepts, and as a .NET developer, which things are required for us, that's what I'm going to cover. And for getting the certification, for learning the Azure, right, in depth, right, you need to join the specific courses. For example, you need Azure Administrator, so separate course is there. You need Azure Fundamental, separate course is there. You need Azure Developer Associate, separate course is there. You need Azure Admin, separate course is there. You need Azure DevOps, a separate course is going to be there. Right? Separate course means what? I'm not saying that course I'm going to provide. Separate course means that is provided by Microsoft. And when I'm saying separate course means that certification program. You can get certification, right? You can get Microsoft Azure certificate, giving the exam online, and for that purpose, for example, if you are going with Azure DevOps or if you are going with Azure Administrator, so you need to learn right, Azure Administrator concept very well, and then only you can appear for the example, for the exam. And once you clear the exam, you will get the certificate, and that certificate will give you, right, very, right, so what I can say, uh, good chance for getting a job or increasing your package, right? That will be helpful. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So this is going to be our right course, that what we are going to discuss now. Now let us proceed and understand chapter one. So I'm going to show you everything right one by one. So chapter one. See, as a beginner, we when we start building our ASP.NET Core Web API application on our laptop or in our desktop on our machine, everything looks perfect. The API runs locally. Swagger endpoint are opening. Database connection is working. All the endpoints respond properly as expected. At that stage, as a beginner, as a fresher, we feel that our application is complete. But in the real world development, when it comes to real time application development, guys, remember, building the application is just one part. The second part is also equally important. That is making that application available for the real user. For example, if I'm developing one application on my machine, am I going to use that application for lifetime? Am I developing that application for myself? If yes, that is fine. But at the same time, right, if you want that application to be available to different clients, different customer, right, different user, then what you need to do, you need to make sure that application should be available to them. And how you can make that application to available to real user? Now, for that purpose, you need to go with one process called deployment. A project is useful only when it is hosted properly, accessible over the internet or an internal network, and that application should be secure, stable, and able to handle real traffic. If this is not available or this is not possible, then what will happen? No one is going to use your application and that is going to be useless. So let us proceed and understand the fundamental concept. It is deployment. Can anybody tell me what do you mean by deployment?
So deploying the build of our project into one of the servers.
Mm. Yes. So
Like
deployment means what?
running the application in cloud with the
Yes.
internet.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. See, deployment means what? Now, it is the process of a publishing an application. Process of a publishing an application to an on-premise server, to a cloud platform, or to an hosting environment, so that it can be used outside the developer machine. So when we develop the project on our own machine, we need a server. We don't need a server. We don't need cloud platform. We don't consider about the hosting environment. On my machine, I'm using Visual Studio. I can run the application and then test the application. That is fine. But outside the developer machine, if you want to ensure that other people should access the application, then what you need to publish that application to a server or cloud platform or hosting environment. So once you host your application or once you deploy your application to a server, then other or real user, real application, real client, they can access. So deployment is nothing but this process. So you develop your project on your own machine, you publish your host that application to a hosting environment, server or cloud. So once you host the application, if real user they are able to access your project or application, that is good. And this complete process, right, moving your code from your local machine to a hosting environment, it's nothing but this process, right? Once you host, if real user they are able to access your application, this complete process is called as a deployment. Clear?
The deployment and production both are same.
Sorry.
Deployment and production,
So, first of all, tell me what do you mean by production?
completing the application running on the server.
See, so when I'm saying deployment, deployment means right publishing that application to a server. That server or cloud platform hosting environment. So that server, it can be a production server, it can be a development server, it can be a staging server, right? For each server, the user, the client are going to be different. For example, right, when it comes to right production environment means real data. I will show you this one, right? Development environment versus production environment. So what is the difference between them? I will show you in some time. So for now, just remember, so that environment, it can be anything. It can be, right, if it is a staging environment, don't think that there is going to be no deployment. If it is a UAT environment, don't think that there is no deployment. Deployment means what? Right, from your machine, you are moving to a different location for the hosting environment so that the other user can access. This environment can be production environment, it can be staging environment, it can be UAT environment, it can be development environment. Clear?
Yeah, yes.
Right? But don't think that if it is a right, if it is a staging environment, until and unless I am not moving my code to the that environment, then staging user they cannot access the application code. They cannot
Yes.
apply right access your services. Right? So that is what you need to understand. Now coming to your point, local environment versus production environment. So local environment means what? It is your own machine. So where you are using a local host. Production environment means where you are using the actual domain URL. So local environment means what? That application is going to be run on developer's one machine. And in case of a production, it needs to be hosted on server or a cloud platform. This local environment is meant for what purpose? Now it is meant for development. It meant for a bug fixing. It is meant for testing and production environment for real user and live access. In a local environment, you can go with the local data. So database is going to be local, and here localized configuration is going to be there. And for production, that data is going to be production data, secure, and that production environment should be optimized, right? So that the best performance you should get. And this local environment is accessible only to the developer, and this production environment is accessible to the real user via internet. So this is the difference. Now, apart from this local environment and a production environment, you might have one development environment, you might have one staging environment, you might have one UAT environment. So different environment. So that environment means that is also going to be different from the local environment, whether it is a production, whether it is a staging, whether it is a development or a testing environment, UAT environment, QA environment, or whatever. Definitely, you need whatever you are doing with the production environment, same thing you need to do within the QA environment, staging environment, UAT environment. Yes, local environment means it is a local host on your own machine. Apart from your own machine, any place or in any other place means you need the deployment. Clear?
Yes.
So this is the difference between a local and environment. So now, what is cloud computing? Let us try to understand. So what is cloud computing? See, if you are going with on-premise deployment, then what you need to do? Then definitely you need to buy the physical server, you need to buy physical machine, you need to buy physical storage, you need your own databases, you need a networking team, you need software that needs to be installed on the physical machine. All these things you need to do on your own. That is on-premise services. But what exactly cloud computing means what? Cloud computing means using the computing resources, right, for preparing a on-premise server or right or for deployment activity, what informations are required, what things are required. We need some storage, we need some server, we need database, we need networking, we need some software. So in cloud computing, whatever information is required for your deployment, right, all these resources are going to be provided by cloud over the internet, and that is nothing but your cloud environment. Cloud computing means using the computing resources such as server, storage, database, networking, and software over internet instead of managing everything on your local infrastructure. So instead of managing this all this thing by yourself on your local infrastructure, cloud computing is going to provide all these things to you so that you can use them as per your requirement. So what are the things cloud computing provides? So it provides the virtual machine. So what do you mean by virtual machine? Can anybody tell me?
So it's a machine which is available on the cloud network, and we are accessing that machine and utilizing it characteristics.
So basically, virtual machines are a software-based computer. See, so for example, that laptop or whatever you are using, that is a physical machine. Virtual machines means software-based computer in the cloud network that works like a physical computer but can configure many things. So, for example, they will give you. So, you need one virtual machine. Okay, fine. I will give you one virtual machine, and that virtual machine you can configure. So, what do you mean by configure? You can decide what will be your operating system. You can define right what applications are going to be run within that operating system. You can define what CPU, what RAM, and all these things are going to be required. So, basically, virtual machines are software-based computer, right? They work like a physical computer, but they will allow you to define what you need in that computer. For example, when you are going to purchase a laptop, you decide what the operating system to be installed, what CPU to be there, what RAM size is going to be there, right? What SSD, I mean, how much SSD you need to install. So that's what you are saying, and accordingly, you are getting that laptop that is a physical machine. Similarly, in cloud computing, right, in cloud, you will also get similar kind of a computer that is called virtual machine, where you can define right what you need. Clear?
Yes.
Clear, right? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Right? So similarly, you already know what is database for storing the data, web hosting for hosting the application so that right anyone can access. Storage means what, right? For example, you are going to create some log file, you are going to store some PDF, some images, some videos, right? Some backup. So for that purpose, you need storage. Cloud networking means connecting right different components all together, right? Like your application, user services, right? How they are going to be securely communicate over the internet. Right, security tools means they're going to provide some kind of a protection to your data, right? Protection to your applications. So for example, encryption, firewall settings, right? All these things are going to be provided. Container services, right? Also, they are going to provide right container services so that you can deploy your application as a right. What I can say package, right? So whatever required, right, for deploying the application, everything you can deploy as a package. So that is going to be container services. So, for example, if you go to traditional on-premise, so if you think If you try to right, understand this concept, right, traditional versus cloud computing with some real-time analysis, right? For example, you buy groceries, you cook the food, you clean the utensil, and you maintain the kitchen. So this is nothing but your on-premise. So you have to do everything. You need to prepare your kitchen. You need to right, build your kitchen. You need to buy the groceries. You need to cook the food, right, clean the utensil. Everything you need to maintain the kitchen as per your requirement. So this is like buying the server, maintaining the infrastructure, handling the update, security, everything. If you're going with a traditional or on-premise approach, you only responsible for doing everything. But in cloud computing, it is just like go to the restaurant, order the food, eat, and pay only for what you consume. Similarly, the restaurant handles everything, right? Cooking, infrastructure, staff, and maintenance, right? So in this case, you are only paying for what you consume. But restaurant is going to handle everything, right? Where to buy the groceries, how to cook the food, maintaining the infrastructure, staff maintenance, everything. That is going to be the responsible of the restaurant. You are not responsible who cooked the food. You are not responsible from where they are buying the groceries, right? You are not responsible who is going to clean the utensil. You are responsible for consuming, right, your order. So whatever food you want to, you just order and you just consume, and whatever you consume, you just pay. So that is the difference between, right, traditional on-premise versus cloud computing. Traditional, you have to maintain, you have to manage everything, and here that is going to be separate. Management is going to be handled by the cloud computing. You whatever services you consume for that service, you need to pay. So if you compare this kitchen is nothing but your data center. Chief, right, who is preparing the food is going to be your cloud provider. Food is nothing but application and services. Bill is nothing but pay as you go pricing. So if this particular terminologies are not clear at this point, so don't worry, we'll see these things. So cloud computing means using IT resources over the internet on demand. Just like using a service when needed, instead of going and maintaining everything yourself. Suppose you want one service to deploy. Suppose you want one service for right, managing security. Suppose you need one service for right, troubleshooting. So basically they are providing different kind of services. What services they are going to provide, we'll see. So whatever service you consume, for that service you only need to pay. If you are not consuming, you do not need to pay. Clear? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right? So cloud computing solve many traditional hosting problem. What? No need to buy expensive hardware machines. No need to maintain physical server. No need to worry about the hardware failure. No, right? It is easy to scale resources when demand increases. Faster deployment, right? Better backup and recovery options and better availability. So these are the benefit that what you will get over traditional hosting, right? When you go with a cloud computing. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Now. Now we need to understand that what are the different types of cloud services, right? So different cloud service provider are there, right? What type of services they are providing? So basically, right, three main services are there. One is yes, PaaS and SaaS. So these three things, if you clearly understand, right, then you can think, right, what you need to use when you need to go for a cloud computing. So first one is IaaS, infrastructure as a service. Sir, what do you mean by infrastructure as a service? Now, in this model, the cloud provider gives you the infrastructure. So he will give you the infrastructure, but you are responsible for managing everything. For example, if you look at this infrastructure as a service, for any kind of application, you need networking, server, storage, virtualization, operating system, middleware, runtime, data, and application. So all these things are required for right, operating one project or deploying or making your application live, right? So out of all these key services, right, what are provided cloud computing and what are you are going to manage? For example, how much storage, server, networking, virtualization. This is going to be provided by service provider. So this only they are going to provide the infrastructure. Means what? They will give you one physical, right, virtual machine, and they will say ask you how much server, right, how much storage is required, or what is the server networking. All these things they are going to provide. You have to handle everything. So you need to decide what operating system, what middleware component, what .NET SDK, what application data, everything you need to manage. So infrastructure as a service means these are the things you will manage. These are the things that is going to be provided by cloud. So virtualization is the technology that allows one physical server to be divided into multiple virtual machines, each working like an independent computer with its own operating system and resources. So virtualization means one physical server is going to be divided into multiple virtual machines. And that physical server having one operating system, and on top of that physical server, you can create multiple virtual machines, right? And each virtual machine is going to have its own operating system and one resources. Storage means this is a cloud-based space. So in the cloud where you want to save the files, database, backup, others, so this is also going to be provided. Server are the computing machines that provide processing power and resources to run the application and services. And we have already discussed networking means connecting different components right together. And what things you need to manage? You need to manage operating system, middleware, runtime, right, data, and the application. So in simple word, IaaS gives you a virtual server in the cloud. The cloud provider gives you the hardware like environment, but you must install, configure, and manage everything needed to run your application. So if you compare this with one real-time analogy, so IaaS is like renting an empty house. IaaS, double S, yes, it's like renting an empty house. Means what? The house is provided to you, but you arrange and manage everything inside based on your reach. So one empty house is provided where to put the bed, where to put the fridge, where to install the AC, where to put the sofa, TV, kitchen, right? Everything you have to define. Only empty house is provided. That is nothing but yes. So only they will provide the virtual machine. You have to define what operating system to use, what software to install, how to configure the environment, how to deploy and host your application. Everything as a developer or organization, you need to define. So in Microsoft Azure, so if you take the example that Azure Virtual Machine, that is a service is provided by Microsoft Azure, is a good example of a IaaS. With the Azure Virtual Machine, you can manually install and manage Windows Server or Linux, SQL Server database, IaaS, Nginx, Docker, right? Anything, right? So they are going to provide you the virtual machine. You have to decide what to install and how to deploy it on your application. So when it is best for best, right? It is best now when you want more control over the environment, when you need a custom server setup, when you are migrating an existing system, that depends on some server level configuration. So basically, right from the higher level point of view, if you want to manage everything, only that environment is going to be provided, right? That environment is provided to us, and we have to control that environment. Then in that case, you need to go with the IaaS. Then the question is, in our deployment life cycle, do I need to go with the IaaS? No. So in our syllabus, we are not going to use IaaS. Clear?
Sir, when we say virtualization, is it similar to WSL when we enable Hyper-V and
Yes,
use it?
yes, exactly. Virtualization means right, creating a right virtual computer, right? Virtual machine means what? For example, one physical server is there where you install, right, one operating system. And on that operating system, right, now you want some application that needs to be hosted on Windows server. Some application you want to host on a Linux server. Some application you want to host on a Mac server. Then what you need to do, that operating system, that original physical machine operating system is what? That is going to be, right, what I can say, Windows. So that Linux application, that Mac application, they're not going to work on that operating system. So what I can do is what cloud computing provided, okay, the physical operating system is Windows, so that is fine. You do not need to be worried. What you need? You need one Linux operating system. Okay, I'm going to give you one virtual machine where you can install Linux operating system. Okay, I'm giving you one what I can say a virtual machine where you can install your Windows server. I'm giving one virtual machine where you can install, right, whatever operating system you want. So that is going to be virtualization. So while you are getting the creating the virtual machine, you can also tell how much CPU is required, how much RAM is required, how much SSD is required. So this physical information, right, hardware requirement you need to tell. They will give you, and once you got the hardware requirement, right, then you can install your operating system and you can start installing the required software, required application, deployment. All these things you can do, but where you can do this thing on the virtual machine, whatever they have provided on top of the actual physical machine. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So now, so this IaaS is clear. So if you remember this thing, that right, what they are providing the infrastructure environment you have to manage by yourself. Now coming to PaaS, that is platform as a service. So what exactly it is providing? So in this model, the cloud provider gives you a ready-to-use platform for building, deploying, and running your application, so that you do not need to manage the underlying infrastructure yourself. For example, what? Now the same set of steps are going to be there. So cloud provider, they will provide in networking, server, storage, virtualization, operating system, runtime, everything, right? So while you are going to deploy your application in cloud, right? For example, we are going to use this PaaS. So in this case, what we need to do, we are having our application, we are having our database. So by taking our application and the database, what we need to host that into the cloud. So for hosting, you need to decide what operating system to be used. You are not going to install the operating system. You are only telling to the cloud provider, hey, Mr. Cloud Provider, I'm going to use Windows operating system. You are going to tell the cloud provider, yeah, I'm deploying my application and this application target .NET SDK, this application target Java SDK, right? Whatever. So basically, that complete platform is going to be managed by the cloud provider. You are only responsible for managing the application and the data. And obviously, this is very common. So whatever the application you are developing, ASP.NET Core WebAPI, it is your responsibility to develop. Whatever the database, whatever the data it is going to store, that is your responsibility. So in this case, that application and the database is going to be managed by your organization, your organization. Remove things how this application and the data be hosted on the cloud, what operating system, what SDK, right? How much storage, what size, CPU size, right? That everything is going to be managed by the cloud provider. Clear? What you are going to manage and what cloud provider is going to manage, is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So if you take the real-time example, right, PaaS is like renting a fully furnished office. So fully furnished office. Earlier example, empty house. You have to manage everything. And this is going to be a fully furnished office. So basically the building, the electricity, the internet, the furniture, the basic maintenance, everything is managed by the owner properly. You do not need to worry about setting up the office infrastructure. What you need, you simply bring your team, your document, and you start working. In the same way, PaaS is the cloud provider that gives you a ready-made platform, and your main focus only on your application data, application code, business logic, configuration, this thing. Infrastructure that is completely managed by the cloud platform. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right? And if you take the example of a Microsoft Azure, that is Azure App Service is a good example. So, and this how to create this Azure App Service, how to deploy your application into this app service, we are going to see practically. Clear, guys? And it is best for faster application deployment, less infrastructure management. You want to more focus more on your application development rather than the server administration. This is one of the common use cases, right? As a .NET developer, when you are going to host your application, most of the time you are going to work with this platform as a service, because we are developing our application and that application we want to, right, can host into the cloud. This IaaS is clear. Sorry, PaaS is clear. Platform as a service.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So next one is SaaS, right? Software as a service. So software as a service means what? Now everything is going to be provided by the cloud provider. We are only going to use that, starting from the infrastructure, starting from the installation, maintenance, software, application, everything. They are going to provide. We are simply going to use. For example, right, everything, application, data, runtime, operating system, everything they are going to provide. We are going to use. So if you look at the real-time scenario, right? SaaS is like staying in a hotel. Building, furniture, electricity, housekeeping, security, maintenance, all are managed by the hotel staff. You do not need to worry about setting and managing anything. You simply use the room and the service provided, and you just pay it. And if you take the example, right, of SaaS, so Gmail, Microsoft 365, Google Docs, Zoom, Dropbox. So these are the software, right, which is already available. Do I need to manage how this Gmail is developed, where it is deployed, right? Who developed this, what the server resources they are providing, or you are simply using this one? We are the user of the services, or we are managing everything for the services.
User of the service.
So that is nothing but your SaaS example, right? So with these services, you do not need to install and manage the underlying infrastructure or platform. You just open the application and use it. That is the example of a SaaS. Clear? Clear,
Yes, sir.
guys?
Yes, sir.
Sir, so does that mean when we create our application and deploy it to some environment, and if it is readily available to the user, it will become software as a service?
No, you are taking two things, right? So who is developing that application?
So I am the one who developed this application. It is deployed. So will it be
For you,
become
this is not software as a service. So if you are developing the application, then you are taking part of a development, na? So that application development, data management, who is taking the responsibility?
okay? Okay,
If that is going to be developed by them, you simply using, that is different. But in this case, suppose we develop suppose Facebook is developed, we are using that Facebook. So in that case, we consider Facebook as a SaaS. But for the team Facebook, right, who are working on Facebook, for them, right, this is not SaaS. So you have to
okay,
think
okay.
in yourself, who you are, what you are doing. If you are right managing, or if you are simply using that software. Clear?
Clear.
Now, why companies are preferring cloud hosting, right? So basically, right, companies are providing, or right, companies are going for cloud hosting because it is cost efficient, managed services, scalability, better reliability, pay as code. So let us try to understand what do you mean by right cost efficient. So cost efficient means it is going to reduce the need of a heavy upfront investment in physical server, networking devices, storage and maintenance. If you are going to build your physical server, own local server, then you need to buy the server, you need to maintain the cooling system, you need to hire some experienced team member for managing the physical server. For example, if you're working in your company, there is a team called the infra team. They are managing everything, right? So you also need to manage the storage, how much storage is required. Again, you need team for maintenance purpose. For example, some software patch is going to be updated, right? Everything you need to manage. And for this purpose, you cannot compromise with anything. So if you are going to set up means everything, you can't consider that I'm buying the physical server, I'm not going to buying the network devices, I'm not going to buy the storage, right? So every piece of information you need to purchase, and for this purpose, a heavy upfront investment you need to do. But instead of spending a large amount at the beginning, companies can start with fewer resources and expand as needed with the cloud computing. So with the cloud computing, you are starting, you do not need to worry about all this heavy investment. You just start, you just go with some fewer resources, some less right, what I can CPU RAM, and you can start your application. As it is increase, you can increase the server resources. And for this purpose, you are only going to pay whatever you are consuming, not right the heavy amount what is required, right, for setting up this on your local machine. Clear? How it is cost efficient? Is that clear?
Yes,
Clear
sir.
or not?
Yes,
So
sir.
pay
Yes,
you
sir.
as go model. So cloud computing generally follow one model called pay as you go. Means that company usually pay only for the resources they actually use. So, for example, whatever the server resources I'm consuming, I have to tell I need some 10 core CPU, I need some 50 GB SSD, I need some 16 GB RAM, I need Windows operating system, right? So, or I need whatever the resources I'm going to consume. That what you can define, and accordingly you need to pay. So, instead of right, purchasing a complete right house, just taking them as a rent, and for whatever I'm consuming, that's what I'm going to pay. So faster setup, 100%, right? You can see doing this setup is meant ready good, or just some button click and your environment is ready. That is going to be good. So in this case, you have to physically set everything manually, physically, right? That is going to be take more time. And with this one, only you have to create one account on Azure, and that's it. So using some button click, your environment is going to be ready. So managed services, right? So cloud provider handle many infrastructure related tasks. So infrastructure related task means what? Hardware maintenance, software update, monitoring whether the service is going to be availability, right? Everything is going to be managed by them. We are not going to spend much time on the server management. Easy scalability. So you can easily increase the CPU power. You can easily increase the memory RAM storage, right? You can also go with the right horizontal and vertical, right? What I can say, uh, scalability like increasing the right. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Now you're audible.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay. So
sir.
there is
Yes,
right.
you are audible.
Okay, fine. So basically, right, both horizontal scaling and vertical scaling is possible. How to implement horizontal scaling, vertical scaling, we are also going to discuss practically. So better reliability, basically they are providing right better redundancy, going to provide backup support, failure of option, right? Everything, right? You do not need to think about how to take the backup if there is a disaster, right? How that things going to be handled right in a better manner, right? That is going to be provided by them. Global reach right now, right, multiple geographic locations are there, right, regions are there, right. For example, if I'm using one software right from India, then to get the better performance, that software need to be hosted in a region nearer to India or in India. For example, someone in US or UK, then in that case, if they want to get the better functionality, better performance, then that software needs to be installed nearer to their location. And that global reach is going to be provided by, right? Guys, give me 1 minute. So basically, right, whenever you are accessing one application, if that application is hosted and nearer to you, then you will get better performance, right? And in this case, they are providing that option, right? Now you do not, for example, physical server, wherever you host, that is going to be the location. But with this cloud computing, you can decide whether you want to host one instance in India, another instance in USA, another instance in UK. That flexibility is possible with cloud computing. And definitely it is going to give you better security and compliance, right? So even the security is a shared responsibility, but the cloud providers, right, they are spending huge amount for providing the better security and support for modern application architecture. So if you are developing APIs, microservices, whether you are going with a container and Kubernetes based deployment, whether you want to implement CI/CD pipeline, whether you are going with the distributed databases, right? All these things are going to be provided or they are going to support, right? That is the reason why people are moving from online infrastructure to what I can say, uh, cloud infrastructure. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Then what is Microsoft Azure? Microsoft Azure actually is the cloud computing platform that offers a wide range of cloud services. So Microsoft Azure, this is the cloud platform that is provided by Microsoft, and this Microsoft Azure provide a wide range of services. Provides services for application hosting. It provides services for databases. Provides services for storage, networking. It also allows you to create virtual machine, containers, monitoring, right? Everything. Also, it provides a right different geolocations data center, so you can decide where you want to host your application, right? So in simple word, you can consider Microsoft Azure is a cloud platform where developer and organization can host their application. They can host their database. They can create virtual machines. They can manage the database. They can configure the networking. They can run containers. They can monitor the system and use many other services that is provided by Microsoft Azure. Some of the services are these are clear. Right. Now, so there are many cloud computing platforms like Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, right? Many different cloud computing platforms are there. But here we are going to deal with Microsoft Azure scalability. So scalability means what? Now, how you can, right? For example, there is a load increase. So if there is a load increase, how you can scale your application resources. So basically, there are two types of scaling. One is vertical scaling. Vertical scaling means what? Increasing the server resources, more CPU, more RAM, and more storage. And another one is horizontal scaling. Horizontal scaling means adding more instances of the application, so multiple server or container can handle the request. But guys, remember, if you are going with horizontal scaling, 100% load balancer needs to be there. With this rate vertical scaling, load balancer is not required. But if you are going into horizontal scaling, the same application going to be run on multiple instances. In that case, this is required, right? That horizontal the load balancer is required.
Sir,
Next one is
one question. When to go for vertical, when to go for horizontal?
sorry, when to go for vertical and when to go for
Horizontal
horizontal.
scaling.
So basically, you guys need one thing. So CPU, RAM, and storage, there is a rate limitation. So beyond that RAM, beyond that CPU, beyond that storage, you cannot increase, right? Yes or no? For example,
Yes,
you
sir.
have already taken 64 GB RAM. So it is not possible to increase that RAM. So what you can do in that case, right, as there is a limitation, so I can create another right instance where I can decide again a set of a CPU, RAM, and storage that is going to be better, right? So basically, and second thing, right, for example, if you are going with only one server, if you are only going with one instances, if that instances is down, then your application is going to be down. But at the same time, if you are creating multiple instances, if one instance is down, then other instance can handle the request. So basically, both are right. CPU right, vertical scaling is good enough, but at some point of time, vertical scaling having a limitation. So in that scenario, you should go with the horizontal scaling. Again, horizontal scaling is good for the load balancing environment. If one instance is down, then you have only other option, that is horizontal scaling, where multiple instances are going to be run. You know what is load balancing, why we need load balancing?
Yeah, somehow, sir. When there are a lot of requests is there, so to switching the request from one server to another, sort of balance
Uh,
can be, it should not be blocking the system.
then in that case, why are you not increasing the CPU, RAM, and storage? Why are you
Hmm.
creating multiple instances?
Yeah, so,
Limitation of hardware, maybe.
hmm. And also if something goes wrong, like any error comes, the whole system will be down with
Removing
the,
single point of failure.
Yes, single point of failure. So this is the two reason. One reason, limitation. Second reason, if I'm putting everything in a single instance, if that instance now, then that is the reason why we are going with the vertical scaling. Clear?
yes, sir.
Right. So availability means 24-hour your system needs to be up and live so that the user can access, right? And that maximum availability is going to be provided by cloud computing provider. If it is an on-premise service, sometimes the system is down. So no one can access your application, right? So pay you as go model, we have already discussed. Whatever the services you consume, for that service, you only need to pay rather than paying a huge upfront amount by setting a one infrastructure, right? So if you are going, so basically you can start with less resources, and as your application traffic goes, right, you can increase the server resources. This is what the basic or fundamental things that what you need to know. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So whatever rate point we have highlighted from the beginning, this is the summary. What is development, local versus production, what is cloud computing, traditional hosting versus cloud hosting, types of cloud services, why companies prefer cloud hosting, and what is Microsoft Azure, and what services are provided by Microsoft Azure. So this is what we discussed in chapter 1. In chapter 2, right, what I'm going to
Yeah,
discuss,
so
sorry,
hi Pranay,
yes.
Vishwadit said, yeah. So there is a questions like, so Azure Cloud is infrastructure as a service, right?
So everything they are going
Means,
to
sorry,
provide.
platform as a service, right?
No, no, they are providing
Or
IaaS. All these services are provided. They are
okay,
providing software as a service, right? For example, they are providing Outlook. Outlook. So you know Microsoft Outlook.
yes,
Right? So similar to Google Gmail,
for
there
sending
are
mails, right? We are using cloud.
also Dropbox, Outlook, right? That is software as a service. They're also
Okay.
providing right IaaS, right, where you can create virtual machines, right, where you can configure everything. That is also provided. Right, PaaS also provided. So if you look at the example, right, from the when I'm explaining, right, I have also provided the examples. For example, infrastructure as a service. So what is in Microsoft Azure virtual machine? This is the service they have provided. That is part of your IaaS. Similarly, if you look at the platform as a service, I have given an example, right? Azure App Service. This is platform as a service. And for us, right, SaaS, right, Microsoft 365, Dropbox, right, Zoom. So this Zoom is provided by Microsoft. Dropbox is provided by Microsoft. Microsoft is 365. This is also provided by Microsoft. These are the example of right Microsoft Azure. So this Gmail, that is Google product. This Google Duck, that is a SaaS service provided by Google. Clear?
Yeah, Pranay. Clear. Thank you.
Sir, I have one question, sir.
Yes, please.
Yeah. When to go for the GCP, when to go for Azure? Is there any specific requirement? Is there to this particular kind of applications? You can go only in the Azure. These particular applications only you can
See,
choose
there
the
is
GCP.
no, right? So it's basically depend on your personal preferences. For example, if I'm asking, right, if you are going to develop an application, what technology you need to develop, use, right? For example, I want to develop a WebAPI RESTful services. Whether you should go with ASP.NET Core WebAPI or whether you should go with Spring.
Okay. So there is no specific requirement for that, choosing that
It's the
cloud
same
provider.
application, the same application you can host on Microsoft Azure, the same application you can host on Azure. Sorry, AWS, right? So, but the thing is that Microsoft product, right? They're very much acquainted with Azure because Azure is provided by Microsoft. .NET, right? .NET is also provided by Microsoft. They are more compatible, right? So that is the reason why Java people they are using like AWS. Microsoft right, .NET people they are using Azure. But that doesn't mean I cannot deploy Java application on Azure or I cannot deploy right .NET application on AWS. Everything is possible.
Is there any license cost or anything? It will differ if it is Microsoft cost wise.
So license for what?
For example, I took an SQL Server license, which is using into the my on-prem. Same license I can apply into the cloud when I move my
See,
I
see,
lift and shift it to the Azure, right?
100%,
That time same license
100%.
I can use it, or I need to bring it for the new license.
You have, see, whenever you are developing any application using Visual Studio, right? Are you purchasing a
Hello, sir.
license for Visual Studio? Yes. Similarly, right,
Yeah, am I
if you
audible?
are, right, so you have to understand. So here I'm going to use the
You are audible.
services.
Okay.
You are going to use the services, right, in the cloud. For the services, license is not required, but you are going to pay for that. If you
I
are
think
using
Pranay is having some
on-premises,
network
yes.
issue. He is joining.
No, why there is a... Guys, now I'm audible.
Yes, yes, yes. Now it's clear, sir.
Okay, let me check. Okay, recording is there. Okay, so basically, you have to remember two things. If you are going with the SQL Server, you are purchasing the license for your on-premise, right? And in coming to your Microsoft Azure, that there is some
Sir, your
service.
voice is breaking, sir.
Let me change the network. Actually, give me 1 minute. Guys, am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So license is required, right? But in cloud, what you are more is required, right? The services. Whatever the services you are going to consume, you have to pay for that. For example,
Okay.
here you are purchasing license for a SQL Server database for on-premises. In cloud, you are not going to use a SQL Server. There you are going to use a Azure SQL database. And that for that database, whatever the storage capacity you need, you have to pay for that.
Okay. Okay.
Clear?
Yeah, that is for separate license. I need to take it for Azure SQL. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
Okay. Thank you, sir.
we can use it with a virtual machine also. Our local SQL Server license.
Yeah, if you are going with the variety, see, there are two things I am telling. If you are going with the IaaS, right? I mean, if you are going with the IaaS, in that case, whatever, right, your local, right, whatever the license you purchase, what you can use in that case, you have to install SQL Server there. You have to install the SQL Server. You have to provide the license, everything. In that case, what is happening? You are managing everything. Are
Yeah,
you getting
yeah,
my point?
yeah.
So in
I
that case, right, you have to manage everything. Whatever the software you
yeah,
want to install, you can install. License you have to provide. It's going to be managed by you. But if you are going with right Azure SQL database like PaaS, in that case, that is going to be managed by them. You only need to pay. Where to purchase the license, how to purchase the license, what cost for the license, that is not my responsibility. That is going to be provided by the cloud platform. What I'm consuming on a monthly basis or based on the consumption, right? I'm going to pay for that. Clear?
Clear, sir. Thank you, sir.
clear.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay. So the second thing, right, what I'm going to discuss, the chapter 2. Chapter 2 means what? Understanding the ASP.NET Core Web API and SQL Server architecture. I'm going to develop a simple ASP.NET Core Web API project targeting SQL Server database. And then I'm going to show you how you can host this application to Microsoft Azure. And guys, remember, this is a 5 to 7 day session. So don't expect that in day one, I'm going to explain everything, or day two. So we are going slowly but steadily, right? So that you will understand everything. So why you need, what do you mean by architecture? So guys, remember, can anybody tell me what do you mean by architecture? Uh, Using one layman example, not technical, but some layman example.
So laying the blueprint of a building, maybe.
Exactly. So basically,
It's like Taj
right, architecture is nothing but
Mahal
the
is an
blueprint
architecture
of
and
the
pillars
application.
are the.
Yes. So blueprint architecture nothing but the blue. So just like if you are building and you are going to build a house, for that purpose, foundation, where the rooms, electrical wiring, water pipeline, doors, windows, everything you need to define within the blueprint. That is nothing but the architecture of your building. Similarly, whenever you develop any ASP.NET Core Web API project, many things are going to be put as part of that project. So controller, where to put the business logic, where to put the data access logic, what should be the model structure, what should be the database structure, what should be the details for our application, right? Where to put the configuration, what are the different types of a configuration, everything you need to define, and how these components are going to be interlinked together or how they work together. That part you need to define, and that is nothing but your ASP.NET Core VBP architecture. Suppose, let us try to understand this flow with an example, right? Suppose you developed one product management system, and there is a endpoint API product. Let us assume this is one get endpoint which is going to return the list of product. So when the user send this request, how that request is going to be handled by your system, that is nothing but the architecture of your system. For example, when the request comes to my API endpoint, I have to define one controller action method. So that action method is going to handle that request. So you send the request, that request enter my application, right? There is some middleware component that the request processing pipeline is going to be there. Those pipeline will execute. Those pipeline will decide which API endpoint is going to handle that request, right? Then the controller receives the request. Controller means controller action method will receive the request. The controller action method calls the service layer. The service layer going to apply the business rules if needed. So any business rule you need to implement, that should be part of your service layer. So in the service layer, you implement, right? If you have any business rule that is going to be applied, and the service layer will call the repository. So what is the difference between a service layer and repository? Service layer is going to handle the business logic. The repository layer, they are going to handle the data access logic. So once the service layer call the repository layer, right, is not going to be responsible for any kind of a business logic. Rather than he is responsible for doing the database logic. I mean, how to perform the database CRUD operation with the database, whether you are using ADO.NET, whether you are using Entity Framework Core. So that logic is part of your repository layer. So the repository layer will communicate with the database, and the database is going to execute the operation. For example, if you are going to execute insert, update, delete, select, applying filter, sorting, whatever, that is going to execute in the database. After the database executes the SQL, it will return the data, right? And that data it will return to repository layer. Repository layer will return the data to service layer. Service layer will return the data to the controller, and the controller finally send the response back to the client in the form of a JSON. Clear?
Yes, sir. Sir,
Yes, sir. This
what
is
is unit of work also?
see that unit of work. It is part of your repository part. If you want to execute, right, multiple SQL using a single unit of work. For example, if I'm going to execute one operation which is going to perform the add operation, another right, that is going to be update, another delete. So three operation I want to perform. Then how I can handle, right? If first operation completed, second operation failed, then do I need to roll back the first operation? So basically, unit of work you need to implement whenever you want to go for a transaction management. Transaction management means what? Now I want to execute multiple DML operation as a single unit. If all the operations are completed successfully, then commit the transaction. Otherwise, roll back the transaction. So if that what you want to implement in your project, for that purpose you need to use unit of work. Unit of work is the process or approach for implementing transaction, so that you can have a chance to commit all the SQL statement or roll back all of them. So basically there is no half committed scenario. Half committed means if I'm executing three DML statement, if all the three are completed, then only the data is going to be updated in the database. If there is one issue in any of the SQL statement, prior to that SQL statement, if any other SQL statement are already executed in the database, then needs to be rolled back. So for that purpose, you need to go with the unit of work. Clear?
Yes, sir. So which layer it will be part of?
So definitely it is part of your repository layer.
Okay.
Right? And then how the ASP.NET Core Web API application we have already discussed. So ASP.NET Core Web API, what is it? Is a framework to build HTTP-based RESTful services. These services expose some endpoint that is going to be consumed by different client. That client may be a mobile client. That client may be a front-end application that is developed using Angular, React. That client may be another microservice, right? That client may be a Swagger, Postman, Fiddler, right? Anyone. So that client may be some application, maybe some tools like Swagger, tools like Postman, tools like right, Fiddler, they can test, right? Or applications like mobile application, front-end application, desktop application, other right services, right? Anyone can consume your services once you develop, right? So if you are developing one product management system, then you can provide some endpoints such as a get all product, get product by ID, add a product, update a product, delete a product, some kind of services you need to provide, and the client is going to consume this endpoint, right? And once any endpoint is being hit by the client, right, then that client is going to perform, I mean that endpoint is going to internally call the service layer, that service layer internally going to call the repository layer is going to deal with the database will return the data to repository will return the data to service will return the data to controller will return the data to the client. So that is the flow that is going to be happening behind the scene. Again, if you are going with the right ASP.NET Core Web API project, so few things you need to understand. What is controller? Controller are nothing but the entry point of the API. They receive the incoming HTTP request from the client, and they also return the response to the client. So in simple word, controller is the first internal component of the component that handles an incoming API call. Yes, before controller, many things are happening like model binding, right? API controller also executed to check whether the request is valid. Before that, right, if you are having any kind of a security mechanism, right, if the token is valid, right, many other pipeline, for example, logging pipeline, right, many things are happening, but actual business logic, right, is going to be start from the controller action method. Before the controller action method, pre-processing right concept is also going to be there, but that those are optional. But your actual business logic that is going to be start from the incoming. So what is the responsibility? Receives the incoming request, reading the route values, core string values, header values, route request body data, calling the appropriate service method, and returning the final HTTP response to the client. That is the responsibility of a controller. Similarly, what are the services? Service means, as you have already discussed, it is going to contains the business logic. This is one of the most important layer in a real-time project. The service decide what should happen, what validations are needed, right? What business rules to be applied, what response should be prepared, right? For example, if you are creating a new employee, the service is going to check whether the employee email ID is already being used by someone else, is the salary is valid, is the department is active, should we send a welcome email, should the audit information be stored in the database. So all these informations are going to be handled by the service layer, right? The next one is repository. As we have already discussed, repository layer means for what? Data access logic. Main responsibility of repository to perform the database CRUD operation, insert, update, delete, and retrieve. So any DML operations or the QRL, any DML or DRL. DML means data manipulation language, part of exemplar insert, update, delete. DRL means data retrieval, exemplar select operation. So these four are the insert, update, delete, and retrieve. So these operations are going to be handled by the repository layer, right? Then database, this is the place where the data is going to be stored permanently. If you are creating any tables like users, product, category, order, whatever the table you are going to create, they needs to be created inside a database where you are going to store the data. And the SQL Server, this is going to be our database management system. This is the DBMS which is provided by Microsoft for managing the data. So inside SQL Server, we can create a table, we can manage the relationship between table, we can apply some constraint, right? We can right, process the queries. It can also provide support for performing DML operations. It can ensure data integrity, right? Data integrity means what? Primary key, foreign key. So if I'm inserting a value in the foreign key table, that value should and must exist in the primary key table. So that integrity is going to be checked by SQL Server. It also going to provide the features called sub indexing, transactions, so that unit of work you are achieving, that transaction, security feature, everything is going to be managed by SQL Server. API endpoints, so these are nothing but a unique URL. Each endpoint having a specific URL through which a client can perform some specific operations. For example, my URL, if you get API product, then it is telling that it is going to perform a get operations to retrieve all the product. If you get API product 10, a specific product details I'm retrieving, which ID is 10. Post product means it is going to create a new product. Put means it is going to update a product whose ID is this one. Delete means it is going to delete a product whose ID is this one. So basically this API endpoint going to tell the client I mean, they're going to provide a unique URL. Using that URL, along with the HTTP method, right? Get, post, put, patch, delete. They are going to tell what type of operation they want to perform on the server. What are the client? A client can any application or tool that is going to consume our API. So, for example, a web front-end that is developed using Angular React, some mobile application that is developed using iOS, Android, another API that might be developed using ASP.NET Core or Java, some desktop application that is being developed using Java or .NET, so Swagger UI tool, Postman tool, Fiddler tool, right? Any kind of a tool if you want to use, right? That what you can use for testing the API endpoint, right? So all these clients can call the same API endpoints. And the point that what you need to remember, API clients are not part of the API project itself. So they are the consumer and we are the provider. We are providing API to be consumed by them. So connection string, this is one of the important concept, right? Connection string is going to tell where the application is hosted, what is the database name, how to connect it to the application, I mean the credential. All these things you need to put, and this connection string is going to be used right by the application, whether you are using ADO.NET, whether you are using Entity Framework, or without a proper or valid connection string, they cannot identify where the database is hosted, or they cannot identify how to work with the database. So a valid connection string is very, very important. And you need to provide the connection string, right? You should not hard code the connection string. You need to provide the connection string within the configuration file if you are working with the local development. And when you go to some other environment like cloud or on-premise, you can make use of environment variables. You can make use of Azure key app settings. You can make use of Azure key vault, right? So in some, so how to use this thing in cloud, I will tell you. For now, on your local development machine, you can make use of app settings dot JSON file. Right. So what are the things you can store inside a RAID configuration? So database connection string, JWT settings, email settings, third-party API keys, some application specific configuration. Application specific configuration means some custom values, right? Some custom values means what, right? If you take the example of order processing, so you need to tell, right, that if the total order amount is greater than 1000, then there is no delivery charge. If less than 1000, then the 50 rupees delivery. So this is the minimum threshold, maximum threshold, delivery charge, what should be the delivery. So this kind of some application specific values you can also put inside the convo. Also you can put the logging, right? What is the log labels, for which namespace, what type of a log label, right? So that what you can also configure within the app settings dot JSON file. Also, we are going to work with the different environment based configuration files. Some
Sir,
configuration will be, yes.
sorry to interrupt. Just one question, sir. Like I have seen one creating an .core application, like app setting.json file is also there and app.config is also there. Is it like, is there, what's the difference like? Because,
What is the config? Is the app.config file in a ASP.NET Core VPA project?
sir, I have seen it in the console application. Maybe I can be wrong, but when I
See,
create,
you just tell me, if you are developing any console application, are you going to host the application anywhere?
deploy,
Console
yeah,
application?
no, not hosting. No
No.
hosting will
So
be there.
you are going in a different. So console application is different, web application is different. For hosting,
Okay,
console application is not suitable for hosting.
okay, sir.
Clear? Okay. So we are going to have a different environment, right? Some settings we need in the right. Some settings are going to be common for all environment. Okay. Put them inside app settings.json file. Some settings, right, which are going to be changed based on the environment. Okay. Put them on the required environment. If right, whatever the configuration is required, I mean the values are required for development, put them in development configuration file, and whatever the configuration values, the rate production related configuration values, put them inside the production configuration file. So what is the benefit? Now you do not need to hard code, and right, based on the environment, the actual configuration values the application is going to read, whether to read from the development or production, that is going to be handled by our application. So we just need to put the development related configuration inside this file, product environment related configuration inside this file. And when we deploy the application, we need to tell the environment is development, so that, right, we need to tell accordingly the application, right, right, it is going to load the configuration from this. If we set the configuration environment as a production, then this file will come into the picture. So what is the benefit? Now, right, in real time, right, in development environment, we may enable the detailed error detail. But in a production environment, we may hide this information. Development environment will make use of the test database. Production will use the live database. Development environment, we may enable Swagger. Production environment, we should not enable Swagger. So some of the settings that what we need to provide. And that is the benefit of using configuration, environment-based configuration, right? So one more thing you need to understand, hosting the application and hosting the database, these are two different concepts altogether. Hosting the application means deploying your ASP.NET Core Web API application. You can deploy into local IaaS, Azure App Service, Docker Container, Azure Key, right, right, Azure Kubernetes Service. So many options are there for deploying the web application. So hosting means deploying the ASP.NET Core Web API application into some production environment so that client can consume the services. Hosting the database means what? Deploying the SQL Server, right, on or Azure SQL Server. See, so both are same, right? So what? SQL Server and Azure SQL both are same. SQL Server is meant for your on-premise services. Azure SQL, that is meant for the, right, cloud. Similar to Azure SQL, Azure MySQL, Azure Oracle, PostgreSQL. So all the different kind of databases are available in Azure. So where you want to host? You want to host on SQL Server, you want to host on premises, you want to host on virtual machine. So like it is also possible. And for all these three, you need to purchase the license. And for Azure SQL, you need to, that license is going to be managed by the cloud provider. You only need to pay, right, for whatever you are going to consume. Clear? Clear,
Clear, sir.
guys? Right. So this is fine. And now what I'm going to do in today's session, right? In today's session, the last thing what I'm going to cover, I'm going to create the project, right? The project, whatever I'm going to host into Microsoft Azure, that project I'm going to develop now. For these things, whatever I'm going to use, I'm going to use .NET 8, Visual Studio, SQL Server, and Entity Framework Core. And the complete, again, you can develop the application using minimal API, and another option is a controller-based approach. So in this case, I'm going to develop the application using a controller-based approach. So basically, what I'm going to do, we are going to build a simple product management API which is going to provide the support for all these five operations. Get all product by ID, create a new product, update an existing product, delete a product. And for this purpose, what I'm going to use, I'm going to create a controller, which is going to receive the HTTP request. Services, I'm going to create, which is going to manage the business logic. Repository, that is the interface to interact with the database. DP
Excuse me,
context,
sir.
this is, yes.
When you have controllers, the structure, when you have you call it a layered structure, where you have controllers, services, repositories. Is that called a layered structure? Is that what it's called a layered structure?
Yes,
Where you
this
have
is the layer.
controllers as a folder, service as a folder,
You just
repositories as a
tell me,
folder.
do you have knowledge of a ASP.NET Core or not?
Yes, I do.
Then why you are asking what is controller services repository DB context and SQL
No, no,
Server?
no. What I'm trying to say, I'm just what I said. If we have to the actual name, you call it layered structure. So is that what it's that is actually what it's called? Because we have
Yes,
what's it called?
definitely. See, you just tell me if I'm creating one controller action method, within that action method, can I write the business logic, validation logic, data access logic directly?
uh, um, if it's very simple, you might be able to
No,
write
I'm
no no
asking,
no,
can I
no.
put everything? Can I put everything?
For clean
Let
just
me
for
ask
clean
you.
code.
I'm asking you the question. Please answer me first. Can I put
No, no,
everything with
it's
controller
not right
action
to do it
method?
that way.
Whether right or wrong, that is separate thing. Can I write everything within the controller action method or not?
Yes, you can if you want to. Yes.
But that is fine. But then if I'm putting the same logic into multiple layer, one layer for handling the business logic, another layer for handling the data access logic, then can I consider this as a layered architecture?
Yes. Yes. Layer. Okay.
You got your
Fine. Yeah.
answer? You got your
Yeah.
answer?
Yeah. Fine. Yes. Yes.
Right. So now, right, this is what we are going to develop. And DB context, this is the class which is going to manage everything. Means what? It is the main class for doing the database operation, and this class is going to be used by repository. So what are the software required? First of all, you should have Visual Studio 2022, .NET 8 SDK, SQL Server, and SQL Server Management Studio. This must be installed on your machine to develop the project. So let us proceed and develop the project step by step. So what is the project name I'm going to give? Product Management API. So let me go ahead and create this project, create a new project, ASP.NET Core Web API, uh, product manage my project. So I need to create a separate folder. So this is the project folder where I'm creating. Next, click next. And then I'm selecting .NET 8. I'm using controller based approach. If you uncomment this, it will use minimal API. I'm also enabling the Swagger API. Click on the create button. So my project is created. So, right, before doing anything else, right, what I'm going to do, I just need to ensure my project is working, just run the application and see whether it is working fine or not. So let me test the application. So test this endpoint and see whether it is working. Yes, I'm getting the output. Means what? My application is working. So next, what we need to do? We need to delete the temporary sample file. So basically, I don't need this weather forecast file. So let me delete this one. I also don't need this weather forecast controller. So delete this one. So I have deleted. So now, right, what I need to do, I need to install the required NuGet packages. So as I'm using Entity Framework Core for doing the database operation, so I need to install two packages. One package is Microsoft.entityframework.sql server. This package allows Entity Framework to work with SQL Server database, and another Microsoft.entityframework.tool. This allows for us to do the migration. For example, I'm going to use command like add migration. I'm going to use command like update database. And for this command, I need this package. So two packages I need to install. And as I'm using .NET 8, so I'm also specifying what version of a package to be installed by specifying the version parameter. So now go to the tools, package
Sir,
manager console. Yes,
one question, sir. Sir, whether
yes.
we should go for database approach first or this model approach first, like what should we,
This
because sometimes
See,
just
this is
asking.
not the place where I'm going to explain
Okay,
whether
sorry,
you should
my bad.
use database first or code first. That's what we have already covered in our database identity framework course session. So now, because whatever approach you go, it is up to you. So my main objective is not to explain database first approach, code first approach. What is our main objective? We have one ready-made .NET Core application, one database, and I'm going to give more focus how you are going to deploy that database into Microsoft Azure. Whatever application, whether it is a .NET application, right, whether it is a Java application, any application, it is up to you only, right? Whether you are using Oracle database, MySQL database, whether you are going with ADO.NET or whether you are going with database code fast, that is completely up to you only, right? This is not that important, and here we are just developing the application, and that's what. So now I have installed the required packages. Then what I need to do, I need to create the project folder. So first of all, models, DTOs, data, repositories, and services. These folders I need to create on my project. So let me go ahead and create the folders. So add. First of all, I'm creating the models folder where I'm going to create my entities. Then I'm going to create another folder, DTOs, where I'm going to create all my DTOs for rate communication between the client and server. I'm going to create another folder called services, right, for creating the required business logic. I'm going to create another folder called repositories, right, for managing the right data access logic. Anything else? And yes, data. So I'm also going to create my DB context, and for that purpose I'm going to make use of the data folder. So the folder structure should be controller, data, DTO, model, repository, services, right? And you can see controller, data, DTO, model, repository, services, and you should have these two files: program.cs class file and offsettings.json file. Offsettings and program, this file is optional, and this is for testing your right endpoint. So now, so once we have this thing, right, next what I need to do, I need to create my model, modular entity, for which I want a table in the database. So in this case, I'm going to create a right class, that is product model. And for this product model, I'm going to create a class in the database. So I just created this product model having some properties: ID, name, description, price, stock quantity, right category is active and created on. So these are some of the properties. These properties will become columns in the database, and this ID will become by default the primary key. Next, what I need to do, I need to create my DTOs, right? For doing the database operations, right, I need DTO. For creating the object, I need one DTO. For updating the right product object, I need another DTO. For returning the data, I also need another DTO. So total three DTOs I'm going to create. One DTO for create operation, another DTO for update operation, another DTO for returning the data. So let me start with the product create DTO. The name should be very clear. So by looking at the name, you should identify this is a DTO for the product entity used for doing the create operation. So product create DTO means product entity create operation, and it's a DTO. So once you create the DTO, right, please copy paste this code. And here you can see, right, if you look at this, for while I'm going to create a new product, do I need to take this ID from client, or it is going to be
No,
generated by system? System.
it should be system generated.
System. Name is a mandatory field or optional field.
Mandatory.
So for this purpose, you can say ID, there is no property. For name, I'm applying the required attribute and I'm specifying what is the maximum and minimum length. So that's what I have specified here. Now coming to this description, is this mandatory?
No,
This is optional. So when I'm putting this question mark, it is going to create a nullable column. So description, you can say this is optional. But if it provided content, not more than 500 characters. Price, this is required. Right, range attribute I have applied. So price, you can see range attribute. The value should be between this and this range, right? And the stock quantity, you can see again the value is going to be between this and it is the same set of whatever I applied to price, but here it is 0.01, right? Suppose this is the price. Any minimum value, maximum value you want to specify, you can specify. Stock quantity, it is an integer, so I'm not providing the decimal part. And this is category, this is a mandatory field, and here you can say I'm applying required, and what is the maximum length, that what is active by default. When I'm creating the product, I'm going to set, and this is also going to be set by the system. Not I'm not expecting this is active and created on from the client. So these are the data which is required for creating a new product DTO. Similarly, I'm going to create another DTO for performing the update operations. So product update DTO. So this DTO is going to perform the update operation on the product entity. So in this case, everything is going to be same, right? You can see name, description, price, stock quantity, category, whatever name, description, price, stock quantity, category is there. The same name, description, price, stock quantity, right? Category. Also, whether you want to mark this product as active or inactive, that what you are taking. At the same time, do you want to take this ID as part of the request body or as part of your, right, what I can say, URL path? I want it in both places. If you want in both places, right, you can also apply this required attribute here, right? Product ID is required. So if you are expecting this ID as part of the request body, you can put it here. If you are only expecting this as part of the URL, that is also fine. But in this case, I want both in the request body as well as in the, right, what I can say, URL path. Then this is going to be my product response DTO. So let me go ahead and create this class file. So this is going to my product response DTO. So whatever the response you want to return, or it wants the product is created, updated, or when the user performing the get all or get by ID operation. So these are the information I want to return. The complete product ID name, description, price, to quantity, category is active, right, created all. So this is what I'm going to return. Clear? What are the DTOs we created and what is the role of each DTO? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Now, so once this is done, right, next what I need to do, I need to create my DB context. So this is the main class that is going to be responsible for performing the database operations, right? So performing the CRUD operations. So basically what I'm going with the entity framework or code first approach. So based on our model, I'm going to create the right database. So let me go ahead and create the DBSet property and also going to provide some initial seed data. So here you can see this is my class inherited from DB context, and the connection string is going to be provided right from the program.cs class file. So there only I'll need to tell what should be the connection string, and then uh, the table, right, I'm going to create with the name products, and that table is going to be mapped with my product entity. This is nothing but the meaning of creating a table in the database with the name products, and table will be mapped with the product entity. So here I'm configuring this right database, and what I'm configuring that product entity. So there is a property called price, and for this price what should be the right decimal precision, right? So maximum 18 character, and after the decimal 2 character. If you want to reduce, you can reduce, for example maximum 12 character, and right after the decimal 2 character. And also I'm going to provide some initial seed data for the testing purpose. So here you can see some hard-coded data I have provided for the testing purpose. Clear this file?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
On
sir.
mod- yes, on model creating method is specifically used for right configuring the model. So whatever the model, this is one model. So how to configure this model, right? That what you can define here. Any seed data configuration, right? Everything. Next, what I need to do, I need to create my repository layer. So basically, repository layer, and guys, remember, whenever you are creating repositories, whenever you are creating services, always go with the interface-based approach so that dependency injection you can easily implement, and also unit testing you can easily implement. So first of all, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create my repository, add repository. So an interface iProduct repository. So within this iProduct repository, I'm creating this one, right? So get all product, get by ID method. This method is going to return all the product. This method is going to return product by ID. Also it is going to return in all if this ID is not available. It is going to add a new product. After adding the product, it is not going to return anything. And here you can see update method, delete method. It is also not going to add anything. And right, instead of right, what I can say, task, you can also make use of right, what I can say, of right, instead of a void, you can mark this as a, see, in this case, marking this as a void is fine. Void, because in this case we are just going to update the right, what I can say, uh, the entity states. We are not going to call the any set changes method or nothing. So in this case, simply we are going to, right, what I can say, perform the method in a synchronous manner, and we are just updating the entity state. So what is entity state? Can anybody tell me? What do you mean by entity state? And what are the different entity states?
Sir, untracked, modified. Uh,
Yes.
like that.
So each entity, whenever you are working with a Red entity framework core, each entity have a state. Added when you add that entity to the DB context, modified when you updated that entity, deleted when you perform the remove operation, that entity state is going to be deleted. And any apart from this, there is also unchanged and no tracked. All right, unchanged means that entity once you retrieve from the database, after then you have not done any changes to that property, that is unchanged. Based on the entity state, it is going to perform the DML operation. And this concept we have discussed in detail, right, in our entity framework core session. So now let us try to observe this method. Get all, get by ID. So the implementation is going to be there. So I'm going to use the DB context. That DB context I'm injecting, the framework will provide the instance. Also, I'm going to use some kind of a logging statement. For that purpose, I'm using iLogger. So get all async method. So what exactly it is doing? Context dot products as no tracking order by
Quick,
descending.
quick one, sir.
Yes.
I don't know if you when we did entity framework, I can't remember now if you taught us this particular topic. In this particular example, we only have one entity, which is product. Now, if it's a project that has multiple entities, like three, four, five, now,
See. I'm saying again one thing. Did you attend my previous my complete session related to ASP entity framework core? Because I'm not going to give more focus on adding multiple entities. Right? That part I have already covered, right? And in detail. Suppose, right, if you go to my
okay. What I
it's
was trying to
simple.
talk about was unit of work.
I'm not going to discuss right those parts because that is not part of our training program. Here, my main objective to create a ready-made project.
Okay,
Whether you are working with multiple entities or 8 to 10 entities, 15 entities, that part I have already covered in my session. Yes or
okay.
no, guys? Who have already attended my ASP.NET Core sessions, right? Or if anyone attending my microservices session, am I use entity framework core with multiple entities?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right? So
Yeah.
that part I have already covered.
Okay. Well,
So and
I
here,
have not
right?
attended the microservices as yet. No.
So microservices and here, right? And guys, remember, here you should know what are right these things. So this ASP.NET Core VBPI project, what I'm developing, you should know this thing. I'm not going to keep more focus on this thing. I'm not going to explain what is as no tracking, what is order by descending, what is the context object, how it is performing the operation right asynchronously. This is your pure C# concept, pure ASP.NET Core VBPI concept, and this part and our main objective, how you can host this application in Azure. And I'm not going to spend too much time right explaining this ASP.NET Core and C# concept. I'm saying very frankly because this part I have already covered in detail, right? And I think, right, I have taken minimum 10, 12 session for, right, entity framework course. So if you go to my training program, full stack student, right, whoever attended this one,
Yes,
entity
sir, more
framework.
than 12.
So more than 12 session I have taken for entity framework course. And after 12 session, I'm not going to spend time, right, explaining this concept. Okay. So now what I'm doing here, as no tracking for improving the performance. How it is going to improve the performance, I have already explained, and I'm not going to explain that again. So this
No.
is
Sorry,
get
sir.
right.
Sorry,
So
sir. What
yes, please.
Sorry, sir. What I was asking is, when I say multiple entities, was in regards to unit of work, if we've done that in the past, where we
Again,
have a
again, you
generic,
are, again, you are asking the same question. I'm not going to explain unit of work here. I'm not going to explain the complicated data access logic here. I'm not going to create a real-time application here. That is not our main
okay,
objective. What our
okay,
main
sir.
objective? Microsoft Azure. How you
All
are
right, sir.
hosting the application is Azure. There is no relation with your complex business logic, no relation with how many endpoints you are exposing, how complicated logic you are writing, how the logic is executing right in your application. That is not. I have already created that complicated logic part. So I have right in my microservices project, right? Let me show you this thing, how complicated logic we have created. right? So that is what I'm not going to spend, right, any more time, right? So this is what we have already developed, right? So many project, right? And if you take the order service, right? So many API layer, application contract, domain infrastructure, right? In application DTO interface, right? What I can say, mapping, messaging services, right? And here you can see services. How many complicated logic? We have already discussed this thing, right? And I'm not going to discuss, right? That complex part here. That's what I have already created. So now my main objective is Microsoft Azure, and for that purpose, I need a .NET Core application working with a SQL Server database, and that is what I'm developing.
Okay,
So
sir.
this is my get by ID method, which is going to return a product based on the ID. This is going to add that product. Guys, remember, in this case, right? You can say I'm not calling the save changes method. That save changes method I'm going to call separately. Here this point of time, what is happening? It is simply adding this product into the context object with the added state. And this is simply updating the product. And right, this is simply right removing the product from the context. I mean, marking the product state as deleted. Here it is marking the entity state as modified. Here it is marking the entity state as right added. And when I call the set changes method for that particular context object, it will check how many entities are associated, and for each entity, what is the corresponding entity state. And based on the entity state, it is going to perform the what operation it is going to perform the operation, whether to perform the insert operation, update operation, or delete operation, that is going to be performed. Clear? Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, that's clear.
Okay. Next, once the repository layer is created, so if you look at this layer, this repository layer, does it contain any business logic, or it contains only the data access logic?
Only data access logic.
Right? And that is the main objective. Repository should not contain any right business logic. Then where to write the business logic in our project? In the services. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create my service class, iProduct service I'm creating here. Right, within the iProduct service, I'm creating this right interface first. So here also I'm providing get product by ID, create product, update product, and a delete product. So all this interface I created, and the actual business logic I'm going to write within this service class. And for performing the database operation, this service class is going to make use of the repository, the product repository, what we just created, right? That means service is going to use the product repository for doing the database operation, but the business logic we need to write here. So we need to write the business logic, and we need to perform the database operation by using the iProduct repository. So here you can see I'm injecting the repository and the logger. Using this repository, what I can do, I can call this method get all, get by ID, add, update, delete, and all these things. And now, right, get all product. So what I need to do, I just need to invoke this method, which is going to return me the list of a product. So once the list of product is returned, this is going to be list of a product. This DTO I cannot return to my client. So what should I return? I need to return what? I need to return product response DTO. Yes or no? This DTO I'm creating for returning the response or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So how I can do this thing? Now I have created, right? You can go with the automapper for mapping that right model to DTO. And that completed again, I'm not adding here because we have already covered the automapper concept. So here what I'm doing, I'm just right mapping this right product entity to product response data manually. So for example, right ID, name, description, price, stock quantity, any right custom name if you want to give here. For example, here product response DTO. So here name if you want to give a different name, you can also update that in the DTO and map that manually. So this method I'm calling here to map the product. Again, what I'm doing here, I'm looping who is on mute, please mute yourself. Right, Ritesh. Right. So in this case, I'm looping through all the products.
One by one, I'm calling this method that DTO I'm getting, and again that DTO I'm adding to this product DTO's collection, and that finally that collection I'm returning. So this is gateway product ID method. So here I'm calling this method, which is going to return me the product. Business logic I have written here. If the product is equals to null, I'm going to return null. Otherwise, I'm going to map that DTO to, sorry, that model to DTO. So this is nothing but your business logic. So create a product DTO. So in this case, right, first of all, what I need to do, I need to map this product DTO to my product object. So what I'm doing here, so I'm creating a new product object by taking the data from this DTO. So name, description, price to quantity, is active, category, all these things. This is what I'm getting from the client. I'm setting this is active to true. I'm setting this created onto the this is nothing but your business logic. And again, now you might be one question, sir, where is the validation? That validation is going to be handled by the controller, right, before calling the service method. And that validation, is not part of our service, because if there is infinity data, we should not come to this layer. From the controller itself, it should return that data is invalid. And after this thing, I'm adding that product to the repository, and then I'm calling the step changes method, which is going to make an insert operation into the database. So once this is done, then I'm mapping that product to right product DTO, and that DTO I'm returning from this action method. The same thing I'm doing here, object method, right? Product ID I'm taking, product DTO I'm taking, right? If you are not taking this ID, that is also fine. So you can operate product DTO async. So what I can do is, so you can remove this thing. This part is fine, because we are also now taking that product DTO, right? That ID we are also taking as part of the product entity. So let me go ahead and modify this thing. Okay. Now product service is there. Right, so DTO.id. So get DTO.id. First of all, the business logic is saying, right, it's saying, okay, first of all, I need to fetch the existing object. If the existing object is not available, I'm returning false. If the existing object is available, then what I'm doing, I'm setting the name, description, price, quantity, category, is active, all these things. And then I'm calling the update method, I'm calling the sub changes method. Delete method, right? Again, I'm doing the same thing here, right? Delete method, deleting the product by ID, calling this get ID method to check whether the product exists. If not exist, return this. If exist, call the delete method, call the save changes method. And this we have already discussed. This is used for mapping the entity to DTO. Clear, guys?
Yes.
This
Yes.
right. It's a very simple logic we have written. Let me also update this part. Okay. So now what I need to do, I need to create my connection string, right? Where in the program.cs class file, go to this class file and update this. So here, product management database. So I'm giving the name as a product management database. So my database name is going to be product management database. The server is going to be this one. So you can see SSMS, open your SQL Server Management Studio. So this is my server name, you can see, and that server name I'm specifying here, and I'm going to use Windows authentication. Connect this one. So already this is there. So let me close one more time. So the database is connected, and here you can see I don't currently have any product management database. So product management DB is there, right? Product management DB is there, but product management database is not there. So that database we are going to create. That connection string I provided here, and then I need to update the program.cs class file. So let me go ahead and do this thing. So first of all, I'm going to add some default logger. So I'm adding some logger services, right? Clearing the logger provided, add console, add debug. So this is what I'm adding here. Tomorrow I'm going to change this one. So instead of console and debug, how we can make use of Serial? That's what I'm going to discuss tomorrow. Then, right, the next one is going to be our right configuration, right? For example, I'm not going to use camel case naming convention. Whatever the property and DTO name I provided, I want to use the same name. And for that purpose, I'm disabling the camel case naming convention. That's what I am providing here. The next what I'm going to do, I'm going to register my DB context, right? So I need to register my DB context. So basically here I'm telling, right, for my application DB context, what we created here for this DB context, right? Here you can see I'm specifying the option, right, which is required by this constructor, that use SQL Server database and the connection string from the offsetting.json file. So from the offsetting.json file, there is a key named default connection. From that key, please read the connection string. That is what I have provided. How to manage the connection string in, right, what I can say in cloud, I will show you separately. This is what I'm developing for my local machine. And then I need to register my repository and services. And here you can see this repository services, they are going to be deal with the database. So whenever something is deal with database, that registration should be scoped instead of a transient and a singleton, that is scoped. And this DB context is also going to register this app DB context service as a singleton service. And then another last thing that what we need to do is I want to enable Swagger, right, for all the scenarios, right? So if you uncomment this one, that means only development environment is going to be Swagger enabled. With this, all the environment Swagger is going to be enabled. So intentionally I'm making this one so that, right, when I deploy it to the production servers, I'll also show you that Swagger endpoint, whether the application is deployed successfully or not. By invoking the Swagger endpoint, I can also show you all these things. So these are the changes that what I need to do. Clear? That program.cs class file is clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. And the final piece of code that what we are going to do is creating the controller. So two controllers I'm going to create. One is product controller. Another one is a health controller, health endpoint controller. So the product controller, it is going to expose the endpoint for performing the database operation using the services. And let me go ahead and do this thing. So basically here you can see this is my route. The base route is going to be API/product. API controller, it is going to do the model validation and it is going to add some API specific behavior. And this is my service. So I'm not going to use the repository from the controller. I'm going to use the services. Service will use the repository. And this is the logger for logging, right? So get all product. Here you can see I'm calling the service. Whatever the data it written, that's what I'm returning here. In case of error, I'm returning 500 status code. Get by ID method, I'm calling this method. If this method return null, I'm going to return not found, otherwise 200. Okay. In case of a error 500, this is going to create a product. So I'm going to create a product. After creating the product, I'm going to create it and write 200. Okay. 201 created along with the new location header and the created product response. And this is my update method. So in this update method, right, I need to do one validation. So what validation I need to do? If ID is not equals to DTO dot ID. If the ID is not equals to DTO dot ID, then what we need to do? I need to return it bat request. Right? ID mismatch. So what I need to write here? ID. So this is this logic, right? I have written here, and here I do not need to pass the ID anymore. Right? ID mismatch. If you want to write, you can also HTTP. Right? So you should put this one from the beginning, and here you can write ID mismatch. ID mismatch. So what we can say, product ID is this one, ID is this one, ID parameter value is this one, and then DTO ID, DTO dot ID value is also going to be this one.
So are we filling the product update DT also while passing it, or just ID? Both the things we are passing.
Hmm? Both one as part of the right URL path and another in the request body. Clear?
Got
In the URL path, I'm going to pass ID, and in the request body, I'm going to pass the ID also. Clear?
yes,
And this is for deleting the product. So this is what we have done. Okay, let me save these changes. Okay. And finally, I need to create the health controller. So go to the controllers folder and create the class file. Right. So this is for just testing the whether the application is working fine or not. After this, what I need to do, I need to generate the migration file.
Sir,
So
what is
yes.
this health, sir? Health controller?
So this is just a after you deploy the application, whether that application is successfully deployed, you need to test. For example, whenever you are going to implement CI/CD pipeline, so for testing purpose, we need to use this health control. For example, if you are working with microservices, whether the right service is up and running, that the console is also going to check whether right by invoking this endpoint, right? So, uh, right, did you attend my microservices or CI/CD sessions?
No microservices. Normal session I attended like .NET full stack.
Then this is very right top thing, right? So what is the importance of a health controller? We have explained in microservices. We have also explained right in the CI/CD pipeline. I think you have also not attended the CI/CD session. Then it is also going to be difficult for you, right? When I right add this project to GitHub, and whenever I'm going to implement CI/CD pipeline to deploy, I write this project into Azure. At that time, you will also right get difficulty because you have not yet attended the CID GitHub and CICD sessions. So please go ahead and watch those sessions. I have already uploaded on my YouTube channel. Clear? Right. So this is going to be right package manager console. So what I need to do, I need to generate my migration file. The command is going to be add migration, MIGRAT, migration. Any name you can give initial, INIT, initial create, right? Any name you can give. So it will build the project. If everything is fine, it is going to check your model and DB context. If everything fine, it is going to create the migration file. And once the migration file is generated, next what you need to do, you need to execute the database update. Whatever the migration file is being generated, that file it will execute and create the database required table, sheet data, whatever. Everything is going to be done. So now if you go to the database, you should see that product management database. So product management. So this is the database. Two tables it is going to create, one for managing the migration history and another one is the products table. So in the products table, you should see two records. That records we have added, right? So this is the data. So once this is done, next what we can do is we can verify the database. Yes, database is verified. And now we can run the application and execute the endpoint. So update, in case of update, I also need the ID. That what I will also show you. Now run the application, right? So health check, please check whether the application is up and running. Yes, it is running. And then what I need to do, I need to see all the products. So try it. So whether all the product it is displaying. Yes, all the product are visible. Now get API products method. So I want to create a new product. For creating a new product, I need to use this one, not this one. So name, description, price, stock, category. So you can see name, description, price, stock, and category. So this information I have provided. Execute this one. So it should create the newly created product ID, right? So then you can see get product by ID. So you can pass one, you will get this product. You will pass three, you will see the newly generated product. If you pass 33, you should see not found. Product with the ID 33, not found. This is update product. So in the update product scenario, you need to pass this product ID as part of the URL also. right? In this case, not here. This is create method here. So here you can pass product ID 1. In the URL path, you will pass product ID 1 and the request body, you need to pass this thing. So now go to here. So this is part of your URL and this is going to be part of your request body. So now execute. So product updated 204 response we are getting. Product is updated and here you can see that one is also passing as part of the URL and this is part of your request body. Now if you want to delete a product, suppose I have created a product with ID 3, that what I want to delete, so you can also delete that product. So now in the database again you will see only two products because the newly generated product we have deleted. So with this our project is ready. So what we are going to discuss next, we are going to discuss how you will make sure that project is ready for the deployment. So some changes I need to do. For example, currently the logging, whatever we implemented, right, that is going to be work right on the, this is what it is logging to the console window and the debug window. Is this good for production environment? No. Secondly, that connection string I have provided in the app setting start JSON file. So then what is the use of this development JSON, production JSON? So do I need to create them? Yes. Thirdly, do I have any unit test project attached here, which is required for CI/CD pipeline? Not attached. So tomorrow what I will do is, first of all, I will make this project ready for right production environment, and then I'm going to show you how you can right work with Azure, how to create your Azure account, right? How to, what is subscription, what is resource group, what is resource, how to create resources, right? How you can deploy your project to Azure. All these things we are going to discuss. So what I can tell you at this point of time, so to work with Microsoft Azure, you need one Microsoft account. So please go ahead and create a account on Microsoft. So you can create a separate account on Microsoft, or you can also use your existing Gmail as your Microsoft account. So please go ahead and create your Microsoft account, which is needed, which is mandatory for creating a, right, what I can say, uh, Azure account. Second thing, if you are working as a student, right, you should have your university, right, email ID. So if you are working as a student and if you are having a valid university email ID, you can create a free student account. Otherwise, you can create a free Azure account, right? A normal free Azure account, validity is 30 days. They will give you 200 USD for doing the testing. And for that purpose, you need a valid credit card. Anyone is fine. If you are having, right, your university email ID, which is active, right, you can go with that student account. Validation is 1 year. Otherwise, you can create a free, right, a normal Azure account whose validity is 1 month. For that purpose, you need a credit card. Credit card is not required for student account. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right, so please ensure to have at least that creation part please clear, right? If you are going to create right with the student, what I can say, student account, or whether you are going with the free normal Azure account, that part at least, that account creation part needs to be done, and then I can explore the Microsoft Azure. So please do this thing, and for this, what type of account you are going to create, Microsoft account is mandatory. Why? See, if you are creating a Google Gmail account, right? A Google account or Gmail, using that Gmail account, you can access Google Play Store, you can access YouTube, you can access Google Drive, right? Everything is possible and you are accessing. Then at the same time, why we are needing that Microsoft account? Because Azure is a service of a Microsoft. Once you have the Microsoft account, you can access Azure easily. You do not need to do anything special. For example, if you are having the Google account, so do I use that same Google or Gmail address to access YouTube? Yes. Do I need the same to access a Google Drive? Yes. That means the same concept is also applicable here. Microsoft account is needed for working with Microsoft Azure. So please do this. Clear?
Yes.
Okay. So that's it for today. Anyone having any question, guys? They can ask me now.